Well, good morning, you wonderful people. Good to be in the house of the Lord together. And we trust that you're excited to hear what God has got to share with us. I am. I really enjoyed the story that I read through this in preparing for this one. And so today we're going to look at restoring what was lost. And there's an amazing story of a lady in the Old Testament who has 3 things that she loses that God restores for her. And it's an amazing thing because she's got this amazing story, and yet she doesn't even have a name. No one knows her name except where she comes from. The lady from Shunem. Ring a bell? It's like, oh yes, the lady from Shunem. No? Maybe you know her as the Shunammite woman. It's starting to ring a bell now, starting to ring a bell. How about this? The woman whose son was brought back to life. Well, if you've got your Bibles, 2 Kings chapter 8. We're going to read the story of this amazing woman who has 3 things that she loses and God restores. But there's this amazing character trait that is linked to this. And so we find the story starts in 2 Kings chapter 8. And then that's our main passage for today. And then we're going to go back to where her story starts. But in 2 Kings chapter 8, we're introduced to her in this way. In 2 Kings chapter 8, reading from verse 1. And the heading in my Bible is, The King Restores the Shumanites' Land. The King restores the Shumanites' land. And the chapter starts by this. Then Elisha spoke to the woman whose son he had restored to life, saying, Arise and go, you and your household, and stay wherever you can, for the Lord has called a famine, and furthermore it will come upon the land for 7 years. So the chapter starts, and Elisha comes to this woman and says to her, honey, you're going to run for your life. There's a severe famine coming, and it's going to be for 7 years. And so you kind of ask yourself, but how does Elisha and this woman know each other? Why does he take time to come to this particular lady and tell her what's going to happen in the next 7 years? So, to give a little bit of background, we go back to chapter 4, where her story starts. And we're going to find the first amazing characteristic of this woman is that she was so generous. And because of that, her hope was restored. That's our first point today. Her generosity and hospitality led to her hope being restored. And we find in chapter 4, this is how it starts. A certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets cried out to Elisha, saying, I want to jump to verse 8. That's a different story altogether. Verse 8, we find her story starts. Now it happened one day that Elisha went to Shunem, where there was a notable woman, and she persuaded him to eat some food. And so it was, as often as he passed by, he would turn in there and eat some food. And she said to her husband, Look now, I know this is a holy man of God who passes by us regularly. Please, let us make him a small upper room on the wall, and let us put a bed in for him for there, and a table and a chair and a lampstand. So it will be that whenever he comes to us, he can turn in there. And so here's this woman, and the first thing we're told is she's a notable woman. She's well known in the area. She's very popular, and she's wealthy, and she has this opportunity. Every time Elisha on the way to Mount Carmel comes past her town, he stops at her home and she says, man, come and eat something. And he's coming so regularly, she says to her husband, hey, he's part of the furniture. Let's build him a house. Let's build him a little flat on top of our house, our flat roof. Let's build him a little bachelor flat. I mean, that's just enough to be able to provide him with a meal every time he comes. Would have been more than generous. She could have stopped there and it would have been an amazing testimony. But she says, I want to go a little bit further. Why? Because this is a man of God. And so they build him this beautiful little place. And it becomes his little flat to come and rest on his journey. And that just shows this generosity of her heart. And Elisha wants to say no thank you, but she urged him, please, come and eat. Have you ever tried, when you want to be generous and someone says, oh, no, thank you, no, thank you. She didn't take no for an answer. She said, no, I insist. This is what I want to do. I want to feed you. I want to build you a flat. And Elisha says, oh, okay. Aren't we we're so funny sometimes. People want to just bless us, like, oh no, please. It's like, please bless me, man. And this woman would not take no for an answer. She said, Elisha, I want to bless you. And so Elisha says to her, man, listen to the blessing she gets out of this. And it happened the day that he came there, and he turned into the upper room, verse 11, and lay down there. Then he said to Gehazi, his servant, call the Shunammite woman. And when he called her, she stood before him. And he said to him, say now to her, look, you have been concerned for us with all this care. What can I do for you? Elisha calls this woman and says, man, you have just been so generous. You've blessed me so much. What can I do for you? And listen to her answer. He says to her, do you want me to speak on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army? Basically saying, do you want some tax relief? You want some favor? You want to move to a nice area of town? You want to move closer to the king? Can I get you a nicer neighborhood? Can I give you some privileges? And this is her answer. So she answered and said, I dwell amongst my own people. Actually, you know what? I'm happy where I am. Who wants to move to Cape Town when you can live in Pietermaritzburg? Who wants a better life? I'm happy. What an amazing woman. Here, Elisha says, man, I can make your life more comfortable. She says, actually, I'm happy where I am. I know my people, my friends are here, my family's here. I am content. And then Elisha's servant Gehazi answered, actually, she has no son, and her husband is old. She says, you know what, she didn't want to say anything, but I really know what she wants. She would love to have kids. She's content, she's satisfied, but there's this emptiness in her. She's never been able to have kids. And her husband is old. That's just a nice way of saying it's not her fault why she has no kids. So he called her. So he said, call her. And when he had called her, she stood in the doorway. And then he said to her, but this time next year, you shall embrace the son. Listen to her response. No, she said, no, my Lord, man of God, do not lie to your maidservant. Saying, don't joke about these things. This has been something that has been on my heart for a long, long time. Don't fool with my emotions, Elisha. Don't make bad jokes. Why? Because this was the ultimate desire of her heart. This was her hope that at long last died. She had given up a long time ago on this dream of having kids. She says, don't spark hope if you can't deliver, Elisha. Don't fool with me, because that is my hope that I've long last given up on. And then it says, verse 17, but the woman conceived and bore a son when the appointed time had come, of which Elisha had told her. What a reward for her generosity. God brought back this hope and gave her the desires of her heart. And you think, man, what an amazing story. But it doesn't stop there. Not only was her generosity restored, or generosity that led to hope being restored, but secondly, we're going to see her faith that leads to her son being restored. Verse 18 says, and her child grew, and now it happened one day that he went out to his father, to the reapers. And he said to his father, my head, my head. And so he said to his servant, carry him to his mother. when he had taken him to her, he brought him to the mother. He sat on his mom's knees until the noon, and there he died. Here's this gift, this hope of a son that she never had. And the baby gets sick. And the baby is on the mom's lap and dies in the mom's arms. Now it's one thing to have your kid die, but to have your kid die in your arms is heartache that no person should ever endure. But look what she does. Instantly, the first instinct when her son has died in her arms. It says, and when she had taken him, verse 21, and she went up with this dead child and laid him on the bed of the man of God and shut the door upon him and went out. She takes this baby to Elisha's bed and puts the baby in Elisha's bed, closes the door and says, I'm coming now, baby. This is not over yet, because I've got faith. Then she called to her husband and said, please send me one of the young men and one of the donkeys that I may run to the man of God and come back. And so he said, why are you going today? It's not a new moon or a Sabbath. And he said, and she said to him, it is well. Husband says, what's the panic? Don't worry, everything is well. This is a mom whose dead son is in the house. She says to hubby, it is well. And she said, then she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, drive and go forward, do not slacken the pace unless I tell you. And so she departed and went to the man of God at Mount Carmel. And so it was when the man of God saw her afar, he said to his servant Gehazi, look, the Shunammite woman, run now and meet her and say to her, is it well with you? Is it well with your husband? Is it well with your child? And she answered, it is well. You think, what's wrong with this woman? It is definitely not well. Her son, her miracle son, is dead. And the servant gets here. Is your husband fine? Are you fine? Is your boy fine? It is well. She's speaking words of faith here. Now when she came to the man of God at the hill, she caught him by the feet. Gehazi came near to push her away, but the man of God said, let her alone, for her soul is in deep distress. And the Lord has hidden it from me and not told me. And she said, did I ask for a son of my Lord? Did I not say, do not deceive me? Then he said to Gehazi, get yourself ready and take my staff in your hand and be on your way. And if anyone meets you, do not greet them. And if anyone greets you, do not answer them back, but lay my staff on the face of the child. This is Elisha speaking, saying, take my staff and go and put it on the child. And the mother of the child said, as the Lord lives and as my soul lives, I will not leave you. She said, that's great, but I need you, Elisha. I need a man of God right now. I don't need a man of God servant. If that works, amazing. But I need you. I'm staying with you. I need God right now. Nothing but God will satisfy. So he arose and followed her. Now Gehazi went ahead of them and laid the staff on the child's face, but there was neither voice nor hearing. Therefore he went back to meet them and told them, saying, the child is not awakened. Man, talk about not your faith. Here's Elisha and the mom on the way home expecting good news, and the servant comes and says, didn't work. Sorry, man. That boy's gone. But Elisha came into the house. There was the child lying dead on his bed. He went and therefore shut the door behind the two of them and prayed to the Lord. and went up and lay on the child and put his mouth on his mouth, his eye on his eyes, his hand on his hands. He stretched himself out on the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. He returned and walked back and forth in the house, and again went up and stretched himself out on the child. And then the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. Can you imagine Elijah? He's prayed, the boy is warm, but he's still not alive. He could have given up and said, man, so close to breakthrough, and he could have walked away, but he kept praying. And he did it again, until he got what they were praying for, the breakthrough. And this child was restored. Can you imagine the mom's heart? A mom who constantly said, it will be well, it will be well. And when Gazi came and said it didn't work, she said, it will be well. Until it was just her and Elisha in the room, and she said to Elisha, you just keep praying, because it will be well. And her faith was answered, and her son was restored. Don't give up on your faith, even if it looks impossible. You just keep hanging in there until you get back what you've lost. And then we jump to chapter 8. Her obedience was restored with favor. Now we come back to our story, where Elisha comes to her again and says to her, there is famine coming. Not only famine, but Israel is under attack by the Syrians. Things are looking bad in Israel. And he says to her, here's what I want you to do. I want you to give up everything. Give up your land, your wealth, everything you own. Leave it behind and go somewhere else. Can you imagine if God told you that tonight? Leave everything. Leave your home, leave your cars, leave your business, leave your school, and just move for 7 years and then come back and see what's left. Can you imagine if you had to leave your home empty for 7 years and came back to Maritzburg after 7 years to what your house would look like? There'd be nothing left. The pipes would be gone, the taps would be stolen, the air cons are gone, everything electronic has been stolen, vandalized, possibly vagrants living in it. Can you imagine your business if you just, as manager of your business, if you just left? They would run your business to the ground. He says to this woman, pack up everything. Leave everything behind and go. And she listens. So the woman arose and did according to the saying of the man of God. And she went with her household and dwelt in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. Now let me tell you, for an Israelite to go and live in the land of Philistines, that's enemy ground, enemy territory. But because of her obedience, God used those Philistines to look after her and provide for her. But things are tough in Israel. 2 Kings chapter 6 tells us a little bit about what's going on in Israel before this. 2 Kings chapter 6 verse 24. Afterwards, Ben-Hadad, king of Assyria, mustered up his entire army and went and besieged Samaria. That's this woman's home ground. Because there was a great famine in Samaria as they besieged it. So there's enemy attacking, there's been severe famine, there's no food. Things are so bad, it says there, that a donkey's head was sold for 80 shekels of silver. Now 1 shekel, the current value, if that was today, that would be 6,000 rand for a donkey's head. That's how desperate people are. They're paying thousands of rands for donkeys' heads because there's no meat available. Only the rich of the rich of the rich can even have meat, and they're buying donkeys' heads to eat. The poor are buying dove droppings. And even dove droppings have been sold for 400 rand for a bucket of dove droppings. I can tell you, I've never been hungry enough to eat dove droppings. You think that's bad? Listen to what happens next in the story in 2 Kings chapter 6. Now as the king of Israel was passing by the wall, a woman cried out to him, saying, "Help me, O king." And he said, "If the Lord will not help you, how shall I help you? From the threshing floor, from the winepress." The king answered, "What is your trouble?" She said, "This woman said to me, 'Give your son that we can eat him today, and we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we boiled my son and ate him. And on the next day I said to her, 'Give us your son so that we can eat him.' But she had hidden her son." Can you imagine? That's how bad things are. They're starting to eat each other's kids. Now you grasp how bad things have gotten in Samaria. And then Elisha comes to this woman and says, "It's going to get worse. There's still another 7 years of this. Go. Go. Go." So she does. She obeys his command. And for 7 years she's looked after by the Philistines. And as I was thinking about that, I thought of the scripture like Job 27, verse 16 and 17. It says, "Though the wicked heap up silver like dust and clothes like piles of clay, what he lays up, the righteous will wear, and the innocent will divide his silver." Or even Proverbs 13:22. "A good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children, but a sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous." God used the unrighteous Philistines to look after this woman in those 7 years of desperation. And if you're obedient to God, let me tell you, God will open up an unusual way of taking care of you, even when things look terrible. Even when the economy's down and the job market's down and petrol prices up and the Springboks are losing, God can still take care of you even in that atmosphere, if you will listen to what He's telling you to do. Then we find the fourth characteristic. Not only was she a woman who was generous, she was a woman of faith, she was a woman of obedience, but the fourth thing about her is she loved to share her story. And as a result, she had her possessions restored. Listen to how the story continues. "And so it came to pass at the end of 7 years that the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, and she went to make an appeal to the king for her house and for her land." She gets back, and what happened in the time, if you left your land for a certain amount of period, in fact it was more than 2 years of vacant land, it automatically became property of the king. The king could take any land that was not used for 2 years. And so this woman's land has been vacant for 7 years, and he says, "Yummy, thank you very much. It's mine." And now she's got to go and pretty much beg for her land back from the king. What do you think of the chances of the king wanting to give back this woman's land? Very slim. Very slim. I mean, that would be ridiculous. He doesn't have to. The law says it belongs to the king. All she's got in her favor is to appeal for his grace. And so she goes to appeal to the king for her house, for her land. Then the king talked with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, "Please tell me the great things that Elisha has done." Now stop there quickly, because here's Gehazi, Elisha's servant, and now he's working for the king. He'd ask him, why is he not working for Elisha? Well, he got fired from working for Elisha because of a very interesting that happened in chapter 5, when Naaman, the Syrian commander, comes to the land of Israel looking for God to bring healing. And he comes to Elisha and he says to Elisha, "Elisha, I heard your God can heal." And Elisha doesn't even go out to meet this Syrian commander named Naaman, but says to his servant, "Just tell him go and wash in the river." And originally Naaman is furious. This amazing man, powerful man, comes to Elisha, and Elisha doesn't even come out to talk to him, but instead says, "Go and wash in the river." And Gehazi goes to him and says, "Listen, if he had told you to do something stupid, would you have done it?" And he said, "Probably." He says, "Then just go and wash in the river." And he goes and he washes in the Jordan, and his leprosy disappears. And then he comes with this load of treasure to Elisha and says, "Here, Elisha, treasure." And Elisha says, "No, thank you. don't want any of your treasure. And he's on his way back, and Gehazi gets a little bit greedy. He says, all this hard work for nothing. And he runs to Naaman and he says, Naaman, it's rich. I know Elisha said he didn't want anything, but you won't believe what happened. Elisha suddenly got some visitors, and he didn't prepare for them, and could we maybe have just a little bit of your treasure? And Naaman says, sure. Kills him a donkey load of treasure. And Gehazi goes and he hides it in his house. And then he comes later that day to Elisha. 2 Kings chapter 5 verse 25. And he went in and he stood before his master Elisha, and he said to him, where have you been, Gehazi? And he said, your servant went nowhere. But he said to him, did not my heart go when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? What is a time to accept money and garments, olive orchards and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male servants and female servants? Therefore the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and your descendants forever. And so he went out from his presence a leper like snow. Greed. Here was one who could have possibly been the next Elisha, just as Elisha accepted the mantle from Elijah. Here he was training up the next prophet, the next man of God. But he quickly realized, this guy has got one big flaw. He's too greedy. He's too greedy. He'll never be a man of God. And here we find his leprosy clinging to him, and he's thrown out of Elisha's presence. And then 2 chapters later we hear him working for the king. We don't know if his leprosy was healed, whether God was gracious and God had forgiven him. Not told. Presume so, maybe. Otherwise, I don't know why he would be in the king's presence. But here again is God's grace. A man restored. Standing in front of the king, and the king says to him, tell me some of those amazing stories of God and Elisha. King of spirit is down. He's just come from 7 years of famine. Things are not looking good in Israel, and he just needs to cheer me up. He says, just tell me again about the stories of God. Verse 5. Now it happened, he was telling the king about how he had restored the dead to life. That there was the woman whose son had been restored to life, appealing to the king for her house and for her land. And Gehazi said, my lord, king, this is the woman, and this is her son whom Elisha restored to life. What a coincidence! As he's talking to the king about an amazing story of God, in walks this very woman whose story he's just told the king about. And in walks this miraculous son of hers into the king's presence. And so the king appointed a certain officer, and he said to her, and when the king asked the woman, she told him the story. What an opportunity. Here's this woman standing in the king's presence. Before she even asks for her land back, she gets to share her testimony of what God has done in her life. From the miracle birth, from the restoring of her son, to even her coming back from the Philistine land. The king is so inspired. The king is so excited after what she's shared that this is what happens. So the king appointed a certain officer for her, saying, restore all that was hers and all the proceeds from the field from the day she left until now. Give her her land, and every bit of money the land has made in the last 7 years, give her that as well. Why? Because the king is feeling inspired by her testimony. Let me tell you, your testimony can inspire people, can lift them up, can change. Just by sharing your story. She shared her story, and as a result, she got back all her land. And I want to close with Psalm 145, just the amazing testimony of just being willing to share your story. Close with Psalm 145, verse 4 to 13. One generation shall praise your works to another, and shall declare your mighty acts. For I will meditate on the glorious splendor of your majesty, and on your wondrous works. Men shall speak of the might of your awesome acts, and I will declare your greatness. They shall utter the memory of your goodness, and shall sing of your righteousness. For the Lord is gracious and full of compassion, slow to anger and great in mercy. The Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are over all his works. All your works shall praise you, O Lord, and your saints shall bless you. That's our job, to speak of the wonders of our God. And who knows what doors that will open for you. And so as we learn from the Shunammite woman, she was a woman who was generous, and God gave her the desires of her heart. She was a woman of faith. God gave her her son back. She was a woman of obedience, and God provided it in a hostile environment. She was a woman who shared her testimony, and God restored all her land back to her. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this amazing woman who had so much restored to her. And Father, if there's any of those areas that we have lost, may you restore to us. May we be as generous as she was. May we have the same faith that she had. May we be obedient as she was. And may we share our story of the good things God is doing in our lives. Father, may we learn from this nameless woman and all that she had restored. We ask this in Jesus' precious name. Amen. Amen. Worship team, don't you want to come up? Please don't